Thursday, July 2nd, as we get into the dog days of summer. When you're talking basketball, sometimes you start thinking this is the time of year there's not a lot to get into. Always something to talk about basketball, especially with the Arkansas Razorbacks. As we look at not only recruiting, but roster limited practices, we saw our best glimpse from practice in a video cutout that the university put out on the men's basketball site yesterday on Twitter, which I thought was pretty cool to get to finally see that. We'd seen a couple of brief highlight reels from our freshman guard Boogie Flan when you looked at his Instagram, but now the Razorbacks have put out something on that. But we're really going to first start off with some recruiting intel, what I consider to be intel anyway. I've got my own source information on this, some others that I also have source information. We look at class of 2025 in the backcourt. We're going to talk about the two new additions at Arkansas. It's been a week since I've been on. I don't think I've gone this long since Calipari was hired, in between doing our HogvilleNET YouTube Live. So there's been a little bit of a gap, a week's gap. That's not that much. But Arkansas's added two players that are effectively walk-ons to the roster. Calipari talked about what the setup would look like with his top nine, and then kind of characterizing the next group of 10, 11, and 12 as being effectively walk-ons on scholarship, not part of the NIL deal, not really coming into it expecting rotation. So we're going to go through all of that. Isaiah Joe signs a new deal with the Oklahoma City Thunder. We're going to talk a little bit about the Pro Hogs. So, man, I'm telling you, there's always something to talk about with basketball. Once again, thank you for joining me this morning on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. If you haven't done it already, please subscribe, like, share. Anything you can do to help us is great, because we love coming on and bringing the content. All right, let's jump out with the intel. Darius Acuff Jr., 6'3" point guard, sturdy, highly skilled scoring lead guard. He's a scoring lead guard. When I look at Boogie Fland, I would consider him more of a scoring lead guard who is a willing facilitator, but probably more emphasis on the scoring part of it. I'd say Acuff Jr. is in the same mold, and you're talking about the fourth player in what I think is a loaded class of 2025. It may be the strongest class in a couple of years, especially at the top 10 to 15. But the fourth rated player, so obviously if you're a five-star, you're a high-level guy. This guy, Darius Acuff Jr., Detroit guy, plays at IMG Academy down in Florida, one of the best basketball independent schools nationally on the high school level. But his recruitment really been, people think it's been a kind of a two-horse race between Kansas and Arkansas. You've got some thought that maybe Kansas was in the lead there. Everything I'm getting, and I've got my own source now, is telling me that if right now it's Arkansas. Arkansas's in the driver's seat. Arkansas is the leader for Darius Acuff Jr. Kansas, maybe some thought there that Kansas is. But talking with Darren Peterson, the third-ranked player in the country and the number one shooting guard in that same class, 6'5" guard, just talking to his dad's telling me that the whole idea for his son at the college level and going forward is to be a scoring point guard. He's really been categorized as a shooting guard. So it seems like Kansas, he just visited there recently. Kansas may be the leader for him. Now, he's still talking about taking visits in July. The entire month of July is a dead period in terms of on-campus or off-campus visits. There's live evaluation at specific events that are designated for coaches to go out and watch players compete, but that's different. And so any visit anybody takes moving forward will have to happen in early August. There's about a 4 or 5 day window before there's a 2-week dead period. And then the end of August, about a 10-day stretch, the 21st through the 31st, where players can go on visits. So if Darren Peterson's going to hold off with the commitment to Kansas to take other visits, how does that impact Darius Acuff Jr. and his timeline on announcement? My source tells me Arkansas is the leader regardless. But to me, he's a scoring guard, whether you call him a point guard, combo guard. Darren Peterson is a prolific scorer, whether he's going to be a scoring point guard, which is what his dad's saying is where he wants to be. And then Malik Thomas, who canceled his visit to Arkansas, or I say canceled it, postponed it, but he's got the same dilemma. If he does want to visit Arkansas or any other school, going to have to wait till August. And so, there's a lot of thought that he's UConn bound to visit the Huskies, prior to the visit that he told me that he was not going to make the trip for. When we were on a week ago, I came on and talked about that with Malik Thomas, another 5-star. All of these guys are top 10 rated guys. Malik Thomas, 6th ranked player in the country. Darius Acuff Jr., 4th. Darren Peterson, 3rd. Malik Thomas is a shooting guard, but he's another guy that's a prolific scorer. So it could be, because NIL is going to be there for these players, for the schools they're looking at, there's going to be plenty of NIL money. Is it a matter of each one of them settling at different places, obviously, where they're not competing for stats and playing time and numbers, feeling like there's too similar positionally and what the strengths of their games are. So where you wouldn't necessarily see a Darius Acuff now and a Darren Peterson teaming up at Kansas. Arkansas is the leader. Jacob Polachek, who was the first national, I guess, he works for On3. He does kind of focus his coverage on Kentucky. But about a week or so ago, his source told him that Arkansas was leading and that Acuff Jr. was leaning towards Arkansas. We circled back over the weekend. He said his information is the same. We both have heard the same talking points from Darren Peterson's dad in terms of what position Darren projects to be and why we think that could impact even a situation at Kansas. So now it becomes, are players going to wait around to see what other guys do in terms of visits? That I can't answer for you. I just know that Arkansas's in the driver's seat right now. Acuff was to have visited UConn over the last several days before this dead period began on Monday, yesterday, July 1st. And so UConn is among the Final Four. Acuff dropped that list. Arkansas was already in it, not a big surprise there. But Kentucky was replaced with UConn on that Final Four list. Kansas and Michigan, 2 places that Acuff has already visited prior to visiting Arkansas back in May. But UConn, if he did visit with the Huskies, that is a dynamic that I guess could change things. But again, I think the Huskies are in the driver's seat for Malik Thomas. So if that's the case, again, I think all signs point to, for various reasons. First, Arkansas is the leader anyway, I'm told right now. And the other part is where other guys are going in terms of teams that Acuff was interested in. Michigan was a place, he's from Detroit, where he visited, but that was Jawan Howard's staff that was in pursuit. That's the home state school. I've got no information that Dusty Mays made up any ground there. And again, Arkansas, what I'm told, is in the lead. So now it becomes, are we on commitment watch in July? July is a busy month. You got 3 different live evaluation periods that players are really going to be focused on. Acuff Jr., by the way, on the Nike EYBL circuit, was scoring over 20 points per game, one of the leading scorers on that circuit. And then when I was in Kansas City for the Session 4, he was one of the players that wasn't there because he was with Team USA's under 18 junior national team going and winning gold, and he averaged, I think, 18 points. Really had a nice stat line in his averages as Team USA rolled. So I think, when we look at Acuff being the first visitor from the high school ranks, when you're talking about a player that's still in high school, for Arkansas with Calipari as the new head coach back in early May, he also is looking more and more like going to be the first player, unless something changes quickly with somebody else, to commit to Arkansas. When could that be? Would he be is he looking at getting a commitment out of the way in July? Is he going to wait till August and take it out a little bit further? I mean, there's no announcement date that's set for him. Not that I've seen, and not that I've got, and my source says they're not sure. Only that Arkansas is in the lead. And then you've got, again, some other folks that are starting to think that Arkansas is in the driver's seat here. So it's not just what I'm getting. And it's been talked about for over a week now. It seems like Arkansas was getting momentum. I feel better that I've got my own source that I respect and is close enough to it, to his camp and his scene, talking about Darius Acuff Jr., to believe that right now it's Arkansas. How long does this take, and what could happen in that time? Again, I don't know the dynamics coming off a UConn visit if that happened. I was told he was going to visit there, and that was, again, right at the end of the similar timeline to what Malik Thomas was going to do last week, but didn't come and visit Arkansas. So let's see how things shake out on this. Will Arkansas pick up any more walk-ons? We're going to get to that. But look, I'm really excited about this because we know Calipari's track record with five-star players, highly coveted high school guys, and until you see it materialize at Arkansas, well, it did in terms of bringing half his recruiting class with him from Kentucky. But this was the first time that you had a player actually come visit where Calipari is recruiting a guy that has not previously already committed to him or signed with him. Remember, Acuff did visit Kentucky as well back when Calipari last year, I think in the fall when Calipari was the head coach at Kentucky. But having said all that, again, I'm going to go back to it. I think Arkansas is the most likely destination for Acuff Jr. When the dust settles, I think Darren Peterson probably to Kansas. His dad not only talking about what position he wants to play, but kind of, we're going to probably take visits and starting in early August, but we may want to get this out of the way fairly soon. So is that a conflict? Is that conflicting information, or does he consider getting some visits in August and making a commitment in August soon? I'm not sure about that. And again, Malik Thomas looks like, like it's probably going to be UConn. We talked about the strong possibility that last week when I came on to tell you folks that he had told me he was not going to make the trip to Arkansas, would have to reschedule it for a later date. Again, that would have to push off to August like everyone else if that happens. So let's just pay attention. I mean, obviously these things haven't been settled yet because we don't have public commitments. I've not been told even of a private commitment. I haven't heard that kind of language yet, although that may be something that's happened. So again, you're off to a great start if you're Arkansas. If Darius Acuff Jr. is part of that. Now, I'm going to stay in recruiting right now just because where John Calipari was over the weekend. It was the last live eval for June. You had scholastic events around the country. Most of your top level players, though, in class of 2025 that Arkansas's got offers out to, top 10 rated guys, were part of Team USA's under 17 World Cup, FIBA World Cup team playing over in Istanbul in Turkey. John Calipari was among some coaches who used that passport. He used his passport that he'd been bragging about getting it updated, and so he was in Turkey to watch Team USA. I know a source told me he was at least courtside for a dominating win over France's under 17 team. But you've got multiple players that Arkansas has already offered in class of 2025 and 2026 and been recruiting. I interviewed some of these players when you go back to May and the events that I attended, not only in Kansas City for Nike EYBL, but the weekend prior to that, I was in Bryan, Texas for the Adidas 3SSB circuit, which was the only live eval period in May for coaches to go out. Calipari was there, Bruiser Flint, special assistant to the head coach at Arkansas. He was there looking at some of these guys, but you're talking about the Boozer twins, Cameron and Caden, AJ Diabonsa, Koa Pete, Chris Sinak Jr., who's just a 6'10" center who's just really shot up on the recruiting charts, the recruiting rankings, top 10 5-star guy now. Arkansas recently offered him. We talked about on one of these segments, but that's just a handful of the players in the class of 2025 that Calipari was out to see. I've interviewed most of those guys going back to May, and all of them that I talked to, DeBonsa, Cameron Boozer, Koa Pete, talked about Arkansas has definitely been in their wheelhouse with Calipari now on board as the head coach, and each one expressed interest in visiting. So we'll see what shakes out there in terms of maybe August or even moving in to the fall before the early signing period with any of those guys. But Calipari's on site to see those guys. Class of 2026, Arkansas's already been pursuing and got offers out to the number 1 player, Brandon McCoy, the 2nd-ranked player, Teron Stokes, the 3rd-ranked player, Caleb Holt. Your top 3 players in class of 2026, all of them obviously 5-star players. And Calipari, again, these are part of Team USA's under 17 competing in that FIBA World Cup over in Istanbul, Turkey. So Calipari not only has his sights set on these players, but he made the trip. Is what you do. So much about recruiting is not just about the evaluation at these events, but it's about being seen. and it's known that you're there, that goes a long way in that building of trust and bond. We know NIL is going to play a factor with any player now, especially 5-star level players. If you're really recruiting a top 8 or 9, these are the kind of players that are in that group. And so NIL is going to play a big part of it, but you're still, with all things being equal, whether it's NIL or some other factors, you make the most of these opportunities. You've got all of these star players in one place competing together on a team together. They get smart to make that trip and to be there. And he wasn't the only one. Other schools there. Chuck Martin was with him. Arkansas assistant coach was there. Davor Remack, the former Hog that won a national title at Arkansas, part of that, 93, 94 national title team, part of the 94, 95 team that made it back to the national championship game and finished runner-up. But Rematch had a photo op with Cal and Chuck Martin there. And so, Rematch still a Hog. I mean, I look at him on social media and Twitter. He still tweets out stuff, and he's all Hog to this day. What you wouldn't expect anything different. The Croatian native, and so he's still lives in Europe and was able to be there. In fact, there were a couple of pro Hogs. I saw this on Instagram in for limited practice, I guess either yesterday, I'm not sure exactly when, probably yesterday, Stanley Amudi and JD Note. So the brand is strong. The pro Hogs they're growing exponentially. We know that the last few years it's about to get wilder than even our imaginations ever thought possible before Calipari was hired in terms of cranking out players to the next level. But that's why you take a trip to Turkey to watch 5-star guys right now, because these are going to be your next batch of one and dones and guys that can really move the needle in your program. You may be off to a good start with Acuff Jr. If he's already privately committed, it's a matter of time. You're in the lead right now for him. I strongly believe that. I've got great source information on it. That could change. I guess that can change. I still don't have feedback from the UConn visit, but still, that's a backcourt piece. Plenty of frontline guys and other backcourt players that you're looking at again. But if you looked at the majority of those players, the Boozer twins, Caden is a lead guard in class of 2025. Cameron Boozer's had just an incredible event over there so far. From what I looked at with the numbers he's put up. Same with AJ DeBonsa. There's some other guys again that are in that 26 class. But there's several players, if you remember Calipari had 3 McDonald's All-Americans signed in his last class, plus Billy Richmond, a top 25, 30ish kid that's a composite 5-star. And so you've got a track record of annually getting those level of players. And multiple guys are going to be projected first-round picks, some lottery picks. Just had a draft where Calipari had 2 players go in the lottery. I believe that's right, and multiple players drafted. So the trend is going to be this is an annual thing, not a, with Musman 3 players drafted. That hadn't happened. You had to go back to the 90s to have that happen when Arkansas had 4 under Nolan in 92 to have that many guys. And so this may become an annual thing, not something where you're waiting 20 plus years. And so you see where that work is done now on the recruiting end. So I'm kind of going on about that as we approach 20 minutes here on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. But recruiting is heating up for the class of 25. For anyone sticking around wanting to see Calipari dazzle us a little bit more with the additions to this first roster, because I think people still see that as a priority. And I think it's plain and clear now, barring something falling in his lap that's unforeseen right now, he has done what he's told us to. We're going to transition now to the current roster and the 2 new additions that came out last week. Because the top 8 or 9, it was hammered home to us. These were his rotation guys. These were the guys that he's going to roll with in year 1, 2024-25. In a deep, tough, loaded SEC. You've added Texas and Oklahoma. It's a bigger league. It's a better league. And he's done exactly that, the top 9. Once that capped with Trevor Brazil, there's a little bit of a cooling off period. And we were coming on here speculating, is he going to sneak in some kind of a guy that could be an impact? Not necessarily projected in your top 8 or 9, But that, I mean, I use the example of Kamani Johnson, not only because he was that guy that was kind of on the fringes of being in the rotation. He was never quite in Musselman's top 7 or 8, but he was always that guy you could inject in there. A guy that came in and knew his role, knew the assignment, and could impact a game and change the dynamics of the game because of his physicality and what he brought in that blue collar stuff where maybe it was lacking some talent. Would there be a guy like that that Calipari identified? I continue to talk about if you could find a wing, whether it's somebody, an international player, just maybe a wing with some height that can be a perimeter knockdown guy. Add some 3-point shooting to your team, and a guy enough to maybe if he gets on the floor can stay there a little bit and help. Those were things I was thinking about. When I look at these two additions, it is in line with what Calipari was setting us up to understand and what he was going to proactively do in the recruitment of the next group, 10, 11, and 12. Well, now we've added 10 and 11. And that all happened last week in the time between the last time I was on with you a week ago on Tuesday. So when I look at these, because these are closer to true walk-on type of additions than they are guys that you would bring in and look at them and immediately say on day one, this guy could help impact things as part of your rotation, even though technically they may be on the outside, they're friends for that. I don't think these guys are friends for that. And I don't mean that to be disparaging. I'm going to go through it and how I see it. I've talked about this a little bit on other platforms, but now that we're back here on HogvilleNET YouTube Live, let's go through the names of these guys. Jaden Karuletwa is the best way I know how to pronounce it. I'm probably butchering that. A 6'6" wing, Sun Valley, California, averaged between 14 and 15 points. I did not see him in any of the recruiting rankings. There's a lot of them that are out there that go pretty deep in terms of how they rank players and how many they around the country. I did not find him in any rankings. I did not see any list of schools and options for him for college, but I might have missed some of that. I'm going to get to some of these comments if I can here in a little bit as they come up. And from what little film I've seen of him, it's been mostly perimeter shooting. Well, that's a wing with size, and if that's the strength of his game, it sounds like it checks the box that I was talking about if you added other guys. I was thinking of either a player that had a little more experience, was a little bit more coveted, and had other options. I don't know what other options he has. I can't say that he didn't, but just looking at the film, looking at some of the factors going into how recruiting works, I definitely see this as a player that's more akin to what a walk-on would be. And this may be a great opportunity for him to learn under Calipari, to be around high-level guys, improve in practice, help in practice, get better. Is there a pathway for this player to have an impact on the rotation? I don't see a vision for that, but that doesn't mean it can't happen, because these things historically, they're outliers. It's a small sample size, but they can happen. And you only have 9 guys. And so injuries, illness, foul trouble in games, a combination of things. And now all of a sudden you're having to rely on somebody. And 2 positives. There's perimeter shooting from this player, from what I can gather. I think he was around 40% 3-point shooter last year. I saw a list of the top players in Southern California, kind of grouped by the top 5 seniors, juniors, and sophomores. And then there were additional list of others to watch. And he was among 23 names of senior players. Not, that didn't include a long list for juniors and sophomores. So he's not necessarily a guy that would be on your radar, but that doesn't mean he can't come in, work hard, and figure out a way at some point to step in and help. Remember, Joseph Pinion, who was a top 100 rated guy and highly recruited as a freshman, was not factoring in, either freshman or sophomore really, into the rotation. But as a freshman, he saved Arkansas's butt in a couple of games. I don't in the SEC, Ole Miss and Missouri helped turn those games around and had some good game, a couple of good games there in league play. I go back historically and look at guys like, Manny Watkins, who came in as a walk-on, Kiko Hadar, Fred Gully. You go back, Ernie Murray under Nolan, Guy Whitney, Players at different times. Chris Walker. Every once in a while, there's a walk on. Now, usually when you look back, there's reasons for that. Some of those rosters are really depleted either by injuries, short on numbers. Some of those players were at the kind of the where Arkansas was crawling out of the primordial mud and trying to get raise themselves back up to a respectable program. But at the same time, some of these guys outplayed guys on scholarships. You just never know how things are going to work out. But those are outliers, they're atypical. I mentioned Caroletwa. I have not even mentioned the second player that came on board, Melo Sanchez. Has experience on the college level at Division II Pacific U. Averaged also between 14 and 15 points. Shot just under 35% from three last year. He started every game as a freshman and sophomore at PU. And so if you add up his 3-point shooting combined, it's closer to 40%. Again, a 6'4" guard, Melo Sanchez. And it's a guy that I think he had a 32-point game last year, maybe a handful of games scoring 20 or more. But again, a guy that I look at as being more reflective of a walk-on kind of role in impact, or maybe somewhere in between a true walk-on and your, these are your 10th and 11th players. And Calipari told us this is how it would be. These guys are on the outside looking in when you talk about rotation. That doesn't mean, again, someone can't, by default, because of a combination of problems you're having with injuries, illness, and or foul trouble in a specific game, or just other guys not being up to the challenge, and you reward a guy that comes in and works hard. If that's the case, you might be in some serious trouble. It's not to disparage these players, but I want to set an honest expectation, and it's my expectation. I'm not telling anyone how to think, but this is how I see it. I come on here to deliver my analysis on things. That's how I see it. But already Arkansas has put out, by the way, the men's basketball program, I talked about it early, has put out a video cut up of some of the stuff going on in limited practices. And what you did not see are the two new players in the cut up. I think there was a quick glimpse of the ball going through the net in Caroletwa under the basket. The ball just comes through the net. But you didn't see any highlights or feature any close-ups of the two new additions in the cut-ups. What you did see were Arkansas's top 9 players featured in this little cut-up, and it was really kind of cool because you saw multiple things. Some of the things that stood out to me, the fact that Adu Thero is the rim hunter that I've seen him play and portray. Eugene Nash, if you want to go all the way back to Eddie Sutton, someone else threw in another famous walk-on in Arkansas's lore. But yeah, so in the cut-up, Adu Thero, the 6'8" transfer from Kentucky, will be a junior. This guy has a lot of off-the-chart measurables when you talk about everything combined. Big leaper, big strong guy, continues to grow. 6'8", may still be growing. Kind of a tweener 3-4 combo. But what I saw in the highlight reel was just an assault on the rim, attacks to the rim. And it was interesting, 2 of the plays involving Adu Thero also involved Big Z, Zvonimir Ivisic, the 7'1" transfer also from Kentucky. These guys were teammates just a year ago. Big Z played in only 15 games. Adu Thero's been with Cal for 2 seasons, now year 3. But in one of the parts of the highlights, there's a kick out to Thero, who's on the right baseline in the corner behind the 3-point line. You see Z, not the strongest closeout, but he is 7'1". He did move to the corner to close out, and Adu Thero with a head fake drove around him and went to the middle of the court. Well, not to the middle, but didn't drive baseline, got around him on the middle side. And instead of going straight to the rim on that right side, he went kind of to the middle in front of the rim. Z was able, with his long strides and length, to recover enough to meet him at the rim and block a dunk attempt. So that was pretty cool part of that. Another part, Thero's coming down the pipe, right down the middle of the paint, challenges Big Z at the rim, is at home. And you see Carter Knox after that dunk, just in amazement of what he just saw. But Adu Thero's that kind of guy. You saw him finish. I think he had another play where he finished off a lob pass for a dunk and drill work. You see some either grad assistants or some staffers on the court during a lot of this stuff that you're seeing. So it didn't look like true 5-on-5 to me. at least not most of it, if not all of it. Some of the angles, it's hard to tell exactly who's on the court at the time some of these plays are being made. But those things stood out to me. You saw Big Z in the cut up hit in a quarter three. You saw Carter Knox with a pull up 3-pointer also from the corner. Nelly Davis making passes, but also hitting a right corner three off a rim pressure, a paint touch on a drive by Boogie Flan, kick out to the right corner. Davis pulls up for a triple. Trevin Brazil, who's back for year 3 at Arkansas, he knocks down a 3 in drill work. You saw him also, I don't know if it was 3-man weave or what the drill was, but finish off with a layup. There was a lob pass, I believe it was from Boogie Flan to Jonas Adu for a dunk. I didn't really see much DJ Wagner in terms of making plays in this cut up. I'm not sure there was, but we did see him in the first part of the introduction part of this video. We saw his face and torso front and center. So Billy Richmond is another player I did not see actually watching through that. I need to go back and look and see if I see him out there. So I'm not sure if someone did and I missed it. Pipe in and let me know. Chime in here. 31 minutes in. I want to thank you all for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. Please hit subscribe, like, and share if you haven't already. Pretty good takeaways from the cut up, because some of the things that we think these guys can be were things that we saw. Things that we saw in the little video. Again, prior to that, the only things I saw both were from Boogie Flan, and they were little brief 4 or 5 second dunk highlights that he'd put on his Instagram from limited practice. So this was quite a bit more. Richmond was graduating. Okay, so I'm behind here. Richmond was not there. He's graduating. So that explains that. I wondered about that. Someone knows something, good information to bring to me today so I can be correct on the record with that. I was wondering why he wasn't in there. But again, these are the kind of things we got used to under Eric Patrick Melsman, seeing these, almost sometimes sometimes it was daily. They slowed down quite a bit last year with it, but still did more than we've seen so far now. But it was a slower pace on getting that stuff out, and I always wondered why. And I think after the season we saw, there's a lot of things that make more sense now in terms of what we did or didn't get out of stuff. So I found that to be interesting. So a few things, just kind of moving forward here. Got a call coming in there. Sorry about that. Someone's asked me, are there similarities to Darius Acuff to guys like Courtney Fortson? The game is much more of a 3-point shooting game now. And I think most of these guys are better 3-point shooters, or they're going to take more. You might see some comparisons to, some of the first step. I'm not going to say is as explosive as a BJ Young, but maybe some Courtney Fortson, maybe some BJ Young in there. Boogie Fland, and now if they get Darius Acuff Jr., if that actually materializes, you're talking about 2 likely one-and-done type of players, and DJ Wagner may end up being a 2-and-done. But when I'm start looking at 6'2", 6'3" guards, in terms of where they're listed, this is the most prolific of any players that size that Arkansas has had in quite some time, and that's pretty big statement. Devo Davis, they listed 6'3", 6'4", good play, really had a great career at Arkansas, but he wasn't a pro projected kind of player. Nick Smith Jr. listed at 6'5" coming in. I think he's a legit 6'4". So a little bit outside that size. But Acuff Jr. also, he's got a reported wingspan 6'6" to 6'7". Some people have him at 6'2", some list him at 6'3". He's strong. From everything I've seen, he's not only strong but very crafty, highly skilled, and it can really score in a multitude of ways. And we say some of these same things. I think he's bigger, obviously, than Boogie Flan. But Boogie Flan can get it at all 3 levels, can be a facilitator. Acuff Jr. is the next guy. And again, a really big force, not only on the Nike EYBL circuit, but with Team USA under 18 several weeks ago. So here's a guy that continues to prove why he's a top 10 rated guy and according to 247 Sports, the number 4 overall player in that 2025 class. But just getting back again to the additions Arkansas's got now. Now you've got enough bodies to go 5-on-5 in practice. Counting Lawson Blake, I guess you have 12 guys. Calipari talked in terms of adding 10, 11, and 12. So he's added 10 and 11. Now it makes me wonder, is there still a spot for anything that could happen in terms of a more highly rated player becoming available or being identified? Again, Calipari's overseas watching. I went through the names of the Team USA guys that Arkansas has been recruiting, but also there's international players he's looking at. They would be not for this upcoming season, but is there an international player that we know? There's some that Arkansas had interested in that would be eligible for a draft in a year, not just for college in a year's time. That would be 2024. Is there anything that could shake out there? A guy getting out of his NLI, National Letter of Intent, somewhere late. Is there, anything that could fall in his lap later? And that would be the 12th guy in terms of numerically, chronologically, where you added them, but would immediately be potentially someone that gives you a little bit more of a potential impact, 1 through 10. I still wonder about that. Based on these last 2 additions, I would say that's probably not as likely as just going and getting another walk-on level guy. They're on scholarship, so technically they're on. I think they're going to be on athletic scholarship. So technically they're not walk-ons, but effectively that's what they are, or closer to that than really impact. Being ready to impact that rotation. If I had to give an edge to someone out of these 2 guys that have been brought in to have a chance, just based on what I think I know now, would be the guy that's already got 2 years of college experience, potentially, because he's older, he's more mature, he's already faced live bullets at the college level outside of high school. Division II, yes, but there are guys that transition from D2 to D1, and there's not a whole lot of that in terms of guys making the kind of splash you would expect them if they're going to crack a rotation at Arkansas under Calipari. But maybe there's something there. So I didn't want to completely rule that out. It's one of the reasons I went back in time, even in Arkansas's program, to go through guys that did break through, memorable names. And a lot of times there was a lot of circumstances that weren't very good around why Arkansas had to lean on them. You don't envision that being something that's going to happen this year. You just never know. But maybe Arkansas with that 12th next edition, the 12th one, Calipari does something similar to what he did with 10 and 11. And even if he does that, there's still a 13th scholarship. If something fell in your lap and you find some reason late, these things can happen in July. They can happen in August. School doesn't start back until September. And so, these are things that could happen. So I try to put some stuff on the table as, let's not rule anything out that's fairly reasonable as something that could possibly happen. So, going down that road, I kind of wanted to hit on some of that is, how could this finish out? I just really don't expect Arkansas to land anything at this point. Now that I've seen what the last 2 editions were, I don't expect Calipari to really prioritize another guy that he thinks could impact immediately in a top 2 rotation. But again, it would have to be something that kind of falls in his lap that he didn't see coming, or it's more than likely it's just another similar addition to what we saw with the last 2. And the top 9, again, were featured heavily in this cut-up, except for Richmond, who's out, graduating, as as someone enlightened me to. All right, we're 40 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I am not going to go much longer here, a few more minutes just to talk about the Pro Hogs. I want to do that real quick. As we move into that, I'll just say we're still waiting on at least 1, probably 2 staff announcements to be official. I think that's obviously Ronnie Burr Jr. We know he's being retained. We need to see potentially, hopefully it comes out and made public in some kind of release like the other ones were eventually, even though we knew they were already on staff. In terms of a title and role, I think Tyler Eulis, following Cal from Kentucky, would be the other one. And who knows if there's something else. I'll throw Joe Johnson's name in there. Speaking of Pro Hogs, So we're going to transition to that. Obviously, we're still also waiting on some more scheduling news. We've talked about all of it so far. I'm not going to recap some of that today. We're going to get off here in a few minutes. But Pro Hogs, Isaiah Joe, I really thought this would happen. One more year left on his 3-year deal with Oklahoma City on a very team friendly. He would have made $2.16 million this upcoming season. June 29th, Saturday, was the deadline for Oklahoma City to pick up that option, or he becomes a restricted free agent. So even though you save a lot of money by doing that, if you keep a player like Isaiah Joe and the value is way more than that, you risk losing that player if they're part of your future plans because they're become an unrestricted free agent in a year's time. And so what teams do is they opt out and immediately negotiate as much of a team friendly deal as they can do, but also get the player a payday that's more in line with what fair market value is. And so you're always interested to see what guys do. Bobby Portis a few years ago re-upped with Milwaukee on a very team friendly deal. His annual market value was probably quite a bit higher than what he agreed to with Milwaukee, but he got multiple years on the deal, and he's happy there. He won a title there. He's been to other places. He talked about he wasn't always happy making more money at other places or making money, but wasn't necessarily happy. He's happy in the Milwaukee situation, so he did that. This may be something similar here because Joe's value, if he'd have tested the open market after OKC declined that option, had he tested the open market and played it out a bit, he had a value range of potentially $18 to $20 million a year in a short-term deal, and a longer-term deal that might squeeze down to 15 or 16 million. Did I say thousand? I meant million if I said thousand. 15 to 16 million spread out over multiple years. But so I think this works for both parties. But a 4-year, we reported it yesterday. Source had told me that 4 years, 48 million was the number, and all that money is guaranteed. I think, and typically your contracts when you do this, a lot of times you'll see the number be a certain amount, and then it just escalates a little bit more and a little bit more through the 4 years. I won't be surprised when more details come out if a lot of his money is heavier on the front end. We may even see a $15 million annual salary to begin or somewhere like that. We'll see. But 4 years, $48 million. That's $12 million a year over the 4 years. And he's locked in with OKC. It's close. That's an easy drive from Fort Smith, where his family still lives, where he's from, to attend games. His teammate from high school. Technically, we're only teammates for 2 weeks in the offseason at Arkansas, because Isaiah Joe went back into the NBA draft pool, was selected in the second round by the Philadelphia 76ers. But a 4-year pro, one of the best gravity players in the NBA because he's one of the better three-point shooters. He is an elite three-point shooter when you take his percentages combined with his volume, and you see with your eyes the gravity he creates for defenses to have to account for him. It helps. It's a predominantly slashing Oklahoma City team. Guys like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, Lou Dort, Jalen Williams. These guys are preferred. Put the ball on the deck and drive. Isaiah Joe opens up everything. He started the last 2 games for Oklahoma City, mostly as 6th man all year, but started the last 2 games of the Western Conference semifinals, a 4-2 series loss to the Dallas Mavericks. Joe was in the starting lineup to, again, the last 2 games of the season. The team with the best record in the Western Conference, the best conference in the NBA. I thought Boston the best team out of the Eastern Conference. Western Conference top to bottom, the better league. And the youngest team ever to be a 1 seed, by the way. So it's a very young team. Isaiah Joe is part of the Thunder's plans moving forward. Nice payday for him. And it's a situation where that was announced pretty quickly after that team option, after he became a restricted free agent. Had he played the market, whatever offers came in, Oklahoma City would be able to match it and retain him anyway. But these are you see these all the time where players and the teams are on the same page about moving forward, and it gives him security at a place he feels comfortable in, confident. And remember, the team that drafted him, Philadelphia, draft guarantee. He got an initial contract. He went late or mid. He went late 40s, but mid second round. But first contract that was commensurate with a lot of guys that were early second round to mid second round, or excuse me, picks 31 through 40. But as it turned out, that was a team trying to win in the moment, and not building, but also didn't, for whatever reason, didn't have a vision for him moving forward, and had to make a tough decision and made a cut. Landed at Oklahoma City. I know the Dallas Mavericks were one of the teams that really wanted him. A lot of teams in the NBA that liked him, even 2 years into the league. So good for Isaiah Joe, though, because he's found a place. You don't have to, grass isn't always greener. Yeah, he might have been able to make some more money by doing this a different way. But I think part of he's, this sets him up for generational wealth, and it won't be his last contract, more than likely. All right, 45, almost 46 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm looking forward. July, I mean, this is not dead period for basketball. I mean, it's a dead period for recruiting. But you're going to have coaches out for live eval events. That's going to be big. But you've also got the Pro Hogs. You're going to have several going through NBA Summer League, which is this month. I believe all 4 rookies will be going through Summer League. Anthony Black, Nick Smith Jr., Jordan Walls, Ricky Council IV. There may be some other Pro Hogs that are going to make another run through Summer League. You've also got some interesting stuff going on with in-state guys. These guys were teammates once upon a time at Arkansas. They were offered while they were teammates, and very young teammates. Bryson Warren was a freshman at North Little Rock. Khalil Ware was a sophomore. And I felt like at the time was right. The iron was hot. It was time to offer these guys. And I think they were playing a game in Fort Smith, maybe against Southside, a conference game. And I remember Corey Williams went to that game, and I just kept saying, man, these guys need offers. And sure enough, they got offers on the same day, the same game night. Bryson Warren, we know, ended up going through the Overtime Elite program, a 5-star guard. He ended up transferring first from North Little Rock to Little Rock Central. Then he moved on to Overtime Elite. And he was drafted in the first round of the G League draft last year. Played in the G League as a rookie, was eligible for the 2024 draft. Did not get drafted, but he signed. He's got an initial deal with the. I believe he got an exhibit. I think he got one of those Exhibit 10 contracts, maybe with Miami, but he'll be on Miami Heat Summer League team. And then Khalil Ware, his teammate, who played at Oregon, opted not to accept the scholarship to Arkansas, started at Oregon, then played last season in Indiana, 2 and done, 15th pick overall, Miami Heat. So these guys are going to be at least teammates again in the Summer League. I look forward to watching them. It's not really Razorback related, but they're in-state guys, and it shows you the strength of basketball in the state of Arkansas, just how good it is. So even though the Razorback didn't have anybody drafted this time, which breaks a run of several seasons going back under Musselman, going back to Isaiah Joe, where you had a lot of guys getting drafted every year. Now you have none, but you've got 2 Arkansas kids still that were, one was drafted, but both will be going along in Summer League. So there's a lot to pay attention to. I can't wait to see some of these matchups and how some of these guys, what they've added to their games. How much stronger have they gotten? A lot of things to keep an eye on. And it keeps you busy if you're a hoops junkie in July. It gives you something to look forward to. All right, we're nearly 50 minutes in. We're going to cut it short today. We're going to be done with it here. One more thing, I need to jump back to Progs just for a second. Klay Thompson, now with the Dallas Mavericks, will be a teammate. He's been a teammate with Pro Hog Moses Moody. Now will be a teammate, assuming there's no trades again, with Daniel Gafford in Dallas. But what's interesting for Moses Moody is he's been, since being a lottery pick in the 2021 draft, he's been playing, sometimes in the rotation, sometimes not. But a lot of that's to do with just Hall of Fame guys being ahead of him, specifically Klay Thompson. There's talk that Andrew Wiggins, that Golden State's trying to move on from him, another wing perimeter player. And so this may be just what the doctor ordered for Moses Moody. Again, we don't know what trades might happen that would affect something, moving players and Pro Hogs on from this point moving forward, looking ahead. But if Golden State has a faith in Moses Moody, that may be part of the reason of letting Klay Thompson move on, and Moody may finally get more of a chance in San Francisco at Golden State. So wrapping things up now, we did hit right at 50 minutes. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. One last plea: like, share, subscribe, Until next time, we'll see you then.